And we're rolling.
Pardon me while I whip this out. This is hilarious because it's crazy, this thing. So it's just like, yeah, so it's just here. Okay, got it.
Got it.
So it's like you know, it's like a massive selfie stick.
It is.
Gosh, okay.
Hey everyone, welcome again to another 360 Timmy. Welcome back to the 2024 season. We're in Cliftonville today, and my special guest is Ash Mukherjee.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
Ash is a dance performance director and a wellbeing facilitator, and we're going to explore his life. Ash is also an actor, a performer, and well, a hell of a life story actually, which began back in India.
Yes, it did, indeed, in Calcutta, which is now Kolkata. In 1979. God, I feel old. Yes.
So there's a bit of tragedy, I guess, in the early part of your life that's kind of formed
Tragic comedy. Tragic comedy. Or comic tragedies, you know. I mean, it's, I suppose, so I was born in Calcutta, you know, and Calcutta is quite a, Kolkata, as I should say, it used to be three villages, Shutanuti, Govindapur and Kolikata, and then Job Chanak, you know, from the East India Company came in, and then all these three villages slowly started merging into this grand city. So the very identity of Calcutta is rooted in Victoriana, which has its great aspects and also not so great aspects in terms of being you know, in terms of having really post-colonial values still. And so for a young queer person growing up, or a neurodivergent person growing up, that would have its own unique set of blessings and challenges, shall we say.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I was born in this, in North Calcutta. My dad played the tabla, my mom sang, my dad was also an engineer. My mom taught, and it was a house full of music, lots and lots of you know, music and poetry. My grandfather had passed away when I was about 1 year old, but I had lots of aunts, so lots of dancing, lots of music. My earliest memories are very much soirees, musical soirees up in the terrace. My mom singing, my dad playing the tabla, and me dancing. You know, so really charming in some aspects. But my mom had PTSD. Which left her really dysregulated, which then sort of, you know, we dealt with the aftermath of all of that in every year. And then I went to a school called La Martiniere, which was founded by a French chap called Major General Claude Martin, who was a close confidant to the Nawab of Oud. And this school, we never had any French, even though it was you know, it was called La Martiniere, the Martinians. But it was a very super posh type. It was kind of like, my friend said, it was kind of like the Eton of India.
Yeah.
And that was to be both my place of education and torture for the next 12 years, you know. And the student hierarchy depended on questions like, you know, what country clubs your parents belong to, or all of that kind of stuff, you know. So, but also I've had some really lovely times in that school, you know, with, you know, but also really badly bullied and teased.
Because unlike now, you know, where you can be who you want to be these days, can't you? As they say, but being young and queer then in India, that I imagine that was really challenging. I guess not just from the pupils, but the teachers as well.
Absolutely, and I want to say with India, in the sense, you know, people ask me, "Do you get a culture shock? Did you get a culture shock when you came to England?" I said, "No, I didn't, but I got a culture shock when I went back to India," because I think my experience and perspective of India was, you know, Calcutta. But actually, India is so vast, and there's so many layers, and there's been so many invasions, and there's this indigenous aspect of India that was not accessible to us. You know, I mean, I grew up speaking, you know, Bengali, but really English was a kind of a second mother tongue, if that makes sense. You know? So in India, in indigenous spaces, you know, queerness and non-binariness and gender fluidness has always existed.
Yeah.
Now it's just that when we are in the lens of when we're looking at it from the colonial lens, we are going, oh, this is man, this is woman, this is this is that. But if you look at some of the temples, you see the sculptures, you see Shiva and Parvati, yin yang is constantly morphing.
Yeah.
You go to the temples, you see within certain castes And maybe that's why the Brahminical aspects were like, oh no, that's a lower caste because they are different to us. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in all of that. But when I go back, I go, oh my God, all of this stuff that was, nothing was prescribed. It was a descriptive religion, Hinduism, like, okay, this person is flamboyant, or this person is definitely not a man, even though they've got male body, like it's, so yeah, I would say going back, I learned more and more about my country, and by a process of elimination, learn more about myself. But I needed to get away I needed to run away from the trauma, basically, and the abuse,
So what was it that got you into dance at that kind of early stage then?
I think it was just a natural, I just moved. If there was, again, it wasn't it wasn't a strategy so much as a response to having so much music around and just dancing. I think my earliest memory was they had a spring festival, and they had all these dancers from Mizoram, and there was this dance with bamboos, and they were doing all this stuff, and I apparently rushed the stage, and someone clicked a photo, and while they were throwing daggers and and started dancing, and I think the roar of the crowd, all of that was like quite thrilling, as well as not being able to resist great drums, which I still can't resist. I love a good drummer. The drummer's always cuter as well.
So what was what prompted the move to the UK, London?
I think it's so led in the sense I have cousins here, and I grew up reading Lady Bird. My mom wanted me to have good English because good English was a great currency in India, so she bought me a book called The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse, and that was kind of my first introduction to Englishness. And she wanted me to fit in this boys' school, and so I would listen to this tape of, and the lady who would speak on the tape sounded like a cross between Julie Andrews and, and so I spoke down a country lane, deep in the roots of so all of that, and then I went to school and I spoke like that the very first day. So I was like, I stood out from day one, do you know what I mean? in an effort to fit in.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to say with all of that is that my relationship with England, Calcutta being a Victorian city, my great-grandparents had, they had trade relationships with other British people. My cousins, my uncle, my uncle was not quite Windrush generation, went to England in the 60s.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a relationship that was always there. I actually really wanted to go to New York, but my dad said no. Because of healthcare and things like that, and I applied for some universities for fashion as well as dance. There was actually an education fair at the Oberoi Grand, which is a grand hotel in Calcutta. And I just went there with my dance videos and my fashion drawings and said, do you have dance or do you have fashion? There was a lady in St. Martin who was a bit like, oh, we're St. Martin's, we do fashion. I said, well, here's my portfolio. And I got into these universities and then I came here. Because what I was studying in school had nothing to do with fashion or dance. It was just like economics and commerce and
good foundations
science.
For things, though. They're always useful, aren't they? I guess, but
yes and no, in the sense that I suppose it was the way it was taught. The school system that we went to was kind of this very kind of. I think it's the same thing. It prevails still now in the sense that the school system was. The boys in La Martiniere, served in World War II, and it's that kind of army boy training, like you either did maths or science or commerce or and you either became a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. And I think, especially for a neurodivergent kid, the way I learned was different to the way, like that kind of very bookish linear learning.
Yeah.
And so it was a challenge, shall we say.
And just explore the neurodivergence. When were you aware of ADHD?
As an adult. I think the ADHD, the hyperactive, it was a response to not having my needs met. Because if I'm, if there is a day where my access needs are met, I don't have ADHD that day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actually very anchored and very calm and very grounded. And, you know, if I've come out in this, you know, and I've had that beautiful morning walk, you know, I will always have ADHD. It's not like I don't have ADHD. That's a misnomer. But, it's not such a trauma response.
Yeah.
It's a manageable condition, if that makes sense.
But do you think back to your childhood and think, oh,
Yes.
actually, that now explains all that? And
Absolutely.
because I certainly, I can see, with my exposure to neurodivergence, I can see children I grew up with and their behaviours at the time, and I go, actually, now I know what that was all about. But I didn't back then. It was just, you know.
Yeah. I suppose for me, it was the... because I didn't have a kind of comparison or a meter, I just thought that was what I was like, you know, and also maybe everyone was like that. But I would overheat quite easily.
Yeah.
And it would take me longer to recover from an exciting day, whereas people would just get up and do it. Whereas my body was just like, it was a physical reaction. It was not something I was, you know, it was, the way I heard music, the way it was a blessing was, I would never have to memorize certain things. It would just be patterns. I would just see, I could hear the color 9. You know what I mean? It was like things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think I was masking all the time without realizing, because I was having to fit into this very patriarchal, binary, you know, maths and science and this and this and that, and I could not sit still. And therefore, dance was so wonderful for me.
Yeah.
Because, and also realizing that dance creates a sort of, dance and music especially, creates a sort of singular point where I can stand and do thousands of things. My body can process all of it, you know, and because it gives me that central anchor, and my body is in service to the music. But when you come out of that, and where does that go? Where is that anchor? So great in the studio, not so great in the classroom.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does.
Great
That
on
makes perfect
stage.
sense.
But daily class, I was like, oh God, like, you know, like, and also with Bharatanatyam, the dance form that I grew up in, we were talking about these really hot male Hindu gods like Shiva and Krishna and the non-binary gods like Harihara and Mohini, and when Vishnu dresses up as Mohini to seduce Shiva. So there was all of this stuff, but God forbid you were actually queer.
Yeah.
You know, and so I found there was this kind of hypocrisy almost, this kind of, you know, I've written a show called Vishnu's Got My Back, and one of the songs in it is called Bad Girl, because I remember one of my first memories was looking at this Bollywood actress called Zeenat Aman. I'm just thinking, my God, she's so... I was 5 years old, and to me that was just playful and wild and glorious. I remember dressing up like her and dancing, and I was like, no, don't do that, bad girls do that. And remember it distinctively, saying that's a bad thing to do. But then we go to a Kali temple, and there is a goddess there that's naked with like wild hair, and that's the goddess, but that's a bad girl. Or yes, you're portraying a queer person, but God forbid you're like that. So I'm like, it's there within our indigenous culture. And it is there in a performative way, but where we don't have access to it. And in fact, you're demonized for having access to it. And this thing is not even ours. It's something borrowed, you know, from that kind of very Victorian way of dealing with it, you know? Yeah, does it answer your question?
That does, it does.
Yeah.
So the move to London, you've been to a university in India. When you come to London, you have more formal dance training?
So I actually had formal dance training in India in Bharatanatyam, and I was in a company, and I was promoted to principal at quite an early age, which again came with its blessings and its trauma. But there was some. I really wanted to learn ballet because when I was a kid, I was very ill because I'm thalassemic.
Yeah.
You get thalassa minor and minor, like a symphony.
So you had about 6 months in bed with that, did you?
6 months. Yeah. How did you know? Yeah.
My research.
Yeah. Okay. How did you know that? Oh my God. Yeah. So 6 months in bed, and then I am. They literally were checking me for cancer, leukemia, this, that, and they couldn't find what was going on. I would get fever at like 6 p.m. on the dot, and they would give me like iron, and I was allergic to like vast quantities because they thought I was anemic. And I just remember almost 6 months to 8 months to a year, we had this old black and white TV, and I heard this music one day. Speaking of, dancing, and I got out of bed and I walked to it, and I hadn't done that for a while. And it was Swan Lake, but it wasn't the swans. It was it was the baddie, Baron Rothbard, and the prince Siegfried dancing around each other, two men dancing. And even though the television was black and white, I was like, this is blue, this lighting is blue. You know, there was a blueness in this. And romantic ballet blanc, you know, like romantic vera, it's all blues. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to dance. And 2 days later, my dad bumped into his friend Bhaskar, Dr. Bhaskar Sen, who now lives in Liverpool actually, but he had gone to Royal College here, and he said, "Have you checked him for either bird flu, Swan Lake, or thalassemia? Because it could be one of the other. I think. Check me for thalassemia and I was thalassemia minor, and all I needed was strong hits of folic acid to level out what was, what I wasn't producing.
Lots of bananas then.
Lots of that's potassium. Yeah. So I mean, they just gave me just like strong hits of folic acid, and I sort of leveled out. But I do remember that was a kind of definitive moment for me going, I want to learn ballet.
Yeah.
And there was no ballet in India, so I started ballet quite late, but I had brilliant teachers like Brenda Last from the Royal, who was just wonderful and magical. And even though I started late, she just took me under her wing. And then Lady Londonderry, Doreen Wells.
From the Royal Ballet?
From the Royal Ballet, both from the Royal Ballet, Anita Young. So my teachers were David Ashmore, Lady Londonderry.
But that wasn't in the Royal Ballet?
No. It was at London Studio Centre. It was London Studio Centre, yeah.
That's almost like getting in the Royal Ballet but without having to go through it. Without the auditions and all that.
I think, say with Lady Londonderry, I thought, I said, can I come and take class? And she said, yeah, absolutely. So I went to her house in Castleknock. The first few days, she gave me Reiki. I think, she was like, okay, the more talented you are, the more you need to learn how to relax. And she saw this sort of 20-year-old, because I was struggling with depression as well. I was getting these terrible flashbacks from what happened to me in India. And I would just have these great productive times, and then I would just stop. And she kind of leveled me out with the Reiki, And a very funny story was, it was kind of like, so she wouldn't take any money for me for teaching me or giving me.
That's incredible.
I was like, I said, Doreen, can I do something for you? She said, well, you could help me weed the garden or wash the car, So I would do that, And she was wonderful. Her posture was just incredible. And if I was weeding the garden or helping with the car, she would say, shoulders down, shoulders down. One mustn't do it like a peasant. She was very funny. And, it was kind of like the Karate Kid, but very camp and very ballet. Because everything I did was
There's a film.
There's a film.
There's a film, eh?
So everything I did was, and that was the year, Tim, that I kind of went, it was like that ugly duckling moment kind of when everything's clicked.
Yeah.
I went, okay, here's the central line. And this is something that informs me to the day, is finding my autonomy with my body, with my neurodivergence, or finding the central line, finding my center, or finding my anchor. The body is the epicenter of everything. So I could go, oh my God, I have ADHD and this and this and that, and focus on thousands of things. But when I close my eyes and look at myself somatically, which is what Lady Londonderry was doing, kind of going, okay, I'm all right. I can see what my body's trying to tell me via these, and that happened. And I think that gift was far more than any ballet training.
Yeah.
And
do you think that was where people say you need to learn to love yourself?
But what does that mean? It's like...
Well, you know who you are, don't you, I guess? And
I suppose
there's no self-doubt anymore.
I suppose, in terms of... oh, lovely. I do love a good boot sale. Since my ADHD working. Learn to love yourself, but let's go buy more shirts.
I can see a little number down there, actually,
Yeah. So I think, I think realizing that because I was attacked so often, I didn't realize that I didn't love myself. I loved a version. The way I escaped was I watched a lot of Turner Classic movies, and I watched, I was a hopeless romantic, and my sense of romance was very much shaped by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, know. And so, Joan Crawford and Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, that was the kind of escape that I had. So I was creating this persona, if you will, that was like, one day I'm going to go become a big star, and that kind of
narcissist adjacent, I will say. And that helped me. That very much helped me. That musicals. If you look at musicals came when there were Great War and the Great Depression. People escaped with musicals. And I think for me, musicals and all these old classic movies became a way of escaping the trauma that I was surrounded by and the abuse that I was surrounded by. And so I used musicals as a way to make sense of reality. And in that reality, I loved myself. But that wasn't really me. It was an idea of me, Even Greta Garbo wasn't really her, it was an idea. It was idealized, I think Quentin Crisp says that this idea of this woman who is like Marlena or like Greta Garbo, it's like, if you saw a woman do that in real life, you'd think she was mad.
Yeah.
Women aren't like that. Women are quite earthy.
Yeah.
And that kind of it's quite a man-made idea of how a woman should be, almost kind of crystallized and trapped like a butterfly in a beaker, That was, and I suppose, I think when I started struggling with depression I realized was, Jim Carrey says this wonderful thing, depression is deep rest from the version of myself that I had to create in order for me to survive.
Yeah.
And so, rest, because when I'm creating that other persona, I'm kind of vibrating here. So naturally my body is going to crash and regulate itself if I don't know how to regulate it. And I think in that depression, that when everything falls on the floor, finally, it kind of reminds me of Wizard of Oz, when she clicks her heels and says there's no place like home. You come home back in your body. You go all the way there and it's a mirage. It's literally a mirage, you could follow it. And then you go, actually, in my body, this is me. And then it's like an onion. It's like just keeps on layering and layering and layering. And I think, I don't even know who I am yet. I'm still finding out. It's revealing itself to me on a daily basis.
We are different people every day, aren't we? As we grow, I think that's certainly the case.
Yeah.
So stardom is one of the things you mentioned there. So we would have seen you in the early 2000s in the So You Think You Can Dance, an opportunity to work with Michael Jackson.
So yes, so there was two things that happened. So the associate producer of This Is It, Alif Sankey, she had seen me perform in Edinburgh. In Soho Theatre. Just going back, I have to cast. And then much later, she put my dance videos on from YouTube to Kenny Ortega. I'm dropping names like crazy. Who was the director of This Is It, and his friend, and then they had seen it. And initially, I was just called in to be an actor for the Earth Song, but then when they saw the Indian classical dance, I remember I was in Leicester Square, and when the phone call came and said, there's a possibility of a duet with him, because I think it was going to be the song. Wanna be starting something?
Yeah.
I think that particular song. And they said, learn the choreography, because when Michael comes and performs it, you'll all forget everything.
Yeah.
Which, Michael passed away before the London rehearsals
tragic, isn't it?
could start. But I remember he had wanted to work with a Indian dancer, me, a flamenco dancer, and so it was going to be this kind of Michael dancing, and then 1, 2, and then 25th of June, he passed away. Yeah. So crazy.
And you were the only contestant on that show. I think there wasn't. You were solo, weren't you? In the final
Move Like
lineup.
Michael. In Move Like Michael. Michael. So Move Like I remember. Move Like Michael. I was the only soloist in the final, and I remember being up on that audition stage, and the producer saying, no, you need to dance to Michael in your Indian outfit. Now, because I was going to do just something to Indian music, and he was, but I think the producer had who I never met, one of the line said, no, we need to see you do it to Michael, and I'm so thankful that he did that. Surrounded by all these people, almost glaring at me, going, who are you? In full temple drag.
Yeah.
And Lavelle, who was Michael's choreographer, said to me, why do you think you can do Indian dance to Michael Jackson? And cameras, and I had to kind of think on my feet, and I went, okay, so Michael loved Bob Fosse, right? The white glove, the minimalist movement, said yes. And Bob Fosse worked with Jack Cole and Mathematics and Kismet and all these other, they were very much influenced by him. He said yes. And Jack Cole and Mathematics went to India to study Indian classical dance, and he said yes, on which they based isolation technique. And he said yes, and I said, here I am, so calm. I mean, who the hell was I thinking? Who do you think you are, Ash? Here I am.
Love it.
I think he loved it because
that should be your trademark, your catchphrase. Here I am.
Yeah. Yes. Post-colonial trauma.
But you did get to dance in front of Jermaine Jackson, didn't you?
Jermaine,
he was a judge.
He was a judge. He was lovely. He was really lovely.
Did those performances on those shows open doors up?
Massively, yeah. I think really with doors opening, it's just like, I think doors start to open when I give myself my own break and go and get out of my own way.
Yeah.
Because I think many doors are actually kind of open, and some doors are closed, and it's about knowing, where one is valued.
Yeah.
And when I learn to value myself, I don't stay in spaces where I'm not valued, and therefore I'm not fighting to open those doors. I go to spaces where doors are already open when they want to work with me. So yeah, I suppose absolutely. Television is a different beast, because that thing that Lavelle said to me, why do you think you can do Indian dance to Michael Jackson? The fact is, you can do. No artist is ever morbid, right? If your expression lines up with the meaning of the song, especially. I grew up in Kolkata. I grew up, in many ways, it's a full circle moment, isn't it? Like, there was a lot of poverty around me, and I was from an upper middle class family, so in many ways I was very privileged, and yet there was ridiculous trauma behind the scenes, right? Like physical trauma and PTSD that I've had to deal with for the rest of my life. So I've worked with children and orphans in India, and so the meaning of the lyrics of the song, that's what Jermaine said as well. The lyrics of the song, that's what Michael was really good at. And you see some of those videos in Man in the Mirror. They shows Desmond Tutu just very quiet and just tears falling from his eyes, because those are those change moments, like saying, no, this is not okay. Those are I'm asking him to make a change. I would remember sitting there, not being able to move in my depression, listening to Man in the Mirror, going, why can't I move? What is it that I need to change within that? So that song has been a real mantra. The Indian dance is the akrumo around it, like in the sense, or sometimes like, because in Indian dance, there's an alignment with your spirit and your body that creates classical dance, and therefore the classical dance then becomes the form in which your spirit starts telling that story. So it's like any other form, and if you're aligning, if you're rehearsing every day, you're aligning with your art is that bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Write that down.
I will. I'm gonna use that as a strap line on this video. Right? I think I am gonna do that.
Yeah, but then I suppose in that space, my body is regulated. In that space, because what kills, I think, is staticness. And staticness is not to be confused with slowing down and being nurturing to myself and stopping. Stopping isn't static. Static is when I refuse to evolve and I refuse to look at what needs to change. For example, when I was in my 20s, it was very adrenaline high based. Now and my Reiki healer said, you're very out of touch with your feminine. And I said, moi? and she said, darling, that's flamboyant. That's just like a really fabulous man, but we're not getting nurturing. You're not nurturing. You're not pausing. Because when I paused, the trauma would catch up with me. So I was running, and then wondering, was it Carl Jung said, when we don't deal with the subconscious and the shadow self, it carries on acting via us, and some things go right and some things go wrong, and we call it fate, And really, once we turn inward and look into that space, we go, okay, that's a survival mechanism that served its purpose, but it's like last season's shoes. We don't need it anymore. We can retire it.
Yeah.
But then your body holds on to it. So that space, and that's why Margate for me was so instrumental in pausing and getting out of that carousel and going, stop. T.S. Eliot and all these other people. Margate I think, attracts a lot of that. A lot of people who have come to say, okay, what's really important here? To live a more, it's going to sound pretentious, but I'm going to say it, a more curated life. Here we are at the Tom Thumb.
Now, isn't that just a perfect bit of planning? Because I just want to talk now about your one-man show. We mentioned it earlier. Vishnu's Got My Back. So
yes.
this is quite a key part of that story. Actually.
Yeah. So my one person show called Vishnu's Got My Back, and it was written by myself and my lovely director and co-writer John Edgley Bond.
Let's stand in front of here for a while while we talk. Yeah.
And Alex and Sarah, who run it, they were very kindly said, come and rehearse here. So there's a group called Sampad led by the lovely Piali Ray, who's OBE Piali Ray OBE. We ought to say that, yeah. And she said, I would like you to create something, for a festival, for a queer and wellness festival called Shout Festival, which was run by Steve Ball. And back at the time it was run by Adam Pushkin. And I said, I've got an idea for a show. And the show I'd started writing in Calcutta in 2015. When the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened?
Yeah.
I remember going out on a night out and being very drunk. I'm sober now. I've been sober 3 years, but back in the day, we were a bit of a party boy. And just all dragged up and lip syncing for our lives. And then the news of the attacks came, and I remember looking at the mirror and feeling really silly, going, oh my God, what are you doing? And I'm thinking, well, actually, I've always used fantasy and flights as a way to escape reality, or sometimes even make sense of reality. And at the time, the show was going to be called Gutter Slut, but I think that's going to be
a very different name.
It's a very different name. So I think a lot of reclamation has happened since then. And Gutter Slut turned into Vishnu's Got My Back. Vishnu's Got My Back, you have to come and see the show.
Really?
But it actually talks about a time where in India we have the third gender called the Hinjaras, which were demonized. And they used to be rock stars back in the day in Mughal courts or in temples. And post-colonial Abrahamic, what they didn't know, they demonized. The sacred feminine has been demonized in any goddess-based cultures, and in goddess cultures or matriarchal cultures, that any femininity is celebrated, whether it's in a male-bodied person or a. So I was teased in school as one, and I remember having to dance, and they all started. The Hinduras clap. They have this particular clap. And they all started clapping, and my parents were in the wings. And they went, oh, they're clapping because... And I went, no, they're not clapping, they're jeering to me. These 1,500 boys jeering at me. And I remember running on stage and just improvising and dancing to this song on Vishnu. And this booing and jeering and making fun turned into this.
That's brilliant.
Vishnu's Got My Back.
Yeah.
Is a part of the show. So... and then realizing that there is a power that greater than me that has always had my back. And that kind of what became the show, the mantra of the show, really. And when I get to perform it in front of people, there was this visually impaired lady, queer lady from in Birmingham, Windrush Generation. And I remember she was in the front row. And what she was absorbing, listening to every single word in the show, And I thought, oh yeah, I'm fine.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And you've recently had earlier part of the year you had another run of.
Yes, lovely Jan at the Arc. They wanted it as a part of their exhibition with Govinda Shah, who has an incredible paintings, and this is going to knock your socks off. So Govinda's work, abstract work, Govinda's creating works that are unseen, from the inside. And this was this beautiful triptych behind me, and there was another red piece in front. In the show, I talk about Goddess Kali, and in the show, I talk about the god Vishnu. That painting behind me was the Buddha, which is the incarnation of Vishnu. And in front of me, the red painting was Kali. So literally, the Vishnu painting was behind me while I was doing Vishnu's Got My Back. And I went, it's so weird. Yeah, so, and the sacred feminine in front. And I thought, this is so weird. So that was I think one just needs to turn up and do their best and not take things personally in life and not make assumptions. And things have a way of falling around. I think there is a sense of well-being that is always there once we know what to eliminate.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's carry on walking.
Yes.
So let's get right up to date. So recently you've also done a very successful Easter camp where you've been developing young people. I did my research. I did my research, and so that's a big part of your life now. I mean, you mentioned to me earlier that you work with a group of migrants, LGBTQ background in Birmingham, and neurodivergence as well. I mean, that's just fantastic work using the arts performance to help those. So tell us a bit about that.
I suppose again, it's when that kind of, back in the day, it was about, in my 20s, it was about making my name as a dancer and and doing all of that, being part of that, and that led me open to a lot of exploitation, Whereas as soon as I turned that around and went, okay, I'm not going to play that game anymore, and I'm going to turn up for parts of me that need love, which are I'm an immigrant, I'm neurodivergent, doors just started opening, and instead of becoming this personality, the principles, which were, being of service to those parts of me that are wounded, and therefore the best way to do it is when other people are like that, other people who have suffered, seen hideous trauma, and they're completely dissociated, and they, for example, the Pride Face project that we've launched in with Sampad and with Journey, with the LGBT displaced asylum seekers group, they, when we ask them, what's your happy memory, they choose to say, okay, the first time I came to Birmingham Pride, that's the day my life began, because I was living this terrible existence before in some spaces. So Pride is a great day. There's all this makeup and joy, and what happens the next day when you can't get out of bed?
Yeah.
How do you celebrate Pride then? So how do we turn up for those parts of us that are hidden as a survival mechanism, that are hidden in shame? How do we gently create space so that they can breathe? That became, so we did I gave them the Mac face template. We gave them that. I said, okay, draw your Pride face. And there was this lovely chap from Pakistan who everything was black and white. And we looked quite sad, and I had a mask. And I said, what's its drag name going to be? And we started, and then I come back, and colour had seeped in.
Oh, bless.
So there was black and white and sadness, but there was also colour within that. I think that's a great...
You've opened the door to that colour for him.
I think he opened the door. I think I just stood there with my door open.
Yeah.
And then it was his choice to open that door.
Yeah.
So I think it's I think when I stand in my own autonomy and I say, this is here, it's there, and then going away, then they had the space to do it. If that makes sense, So that was, Pride Face. We're turning that now into Pride Heart Project this year. It's going to be part of the Headlong. I think it's a mental health festival where I'm quite inspired by Grayson Perry's maps, and so almost creating, okay, if I'm in a depressed state today, how do I, this is where I am, if this was a map, if this was depressed, then how do I get to, maybe not joy, but a functioning type, so what's the road I need to take? So kind of physicalize that would be so we're kind of working with maps, like emotional mapping. I also work with an amazing person called Darren Abrahams, who came and did a workshop with us on how to navigate emotional highs and lows. And then we worked with another person, and we created these paper monsters. She was called Kira Saunders, and we made our own alter ego, with the monster, all those demonized parts of us. I was told I was a daydreamer, and then the monster was like, no, darling, you're a visionary. And so the crown was this great big eye, so reclaiming those parts of us in fun ways, in ways that are non-verbal. So, it's not just trauma, it's actually creating something, making something, and going, oh yeah, I'm giving my, if depression is a freeze response, I'm creating ways in which I'm moving through that. I'm not hyperactive or denying that freeze response. I'm just kind of pawing in that response. That is the space where the work is really sort of
the font, the center of the core of my work is service, and kind of saying, okay, here is my depression. This is how I dealt with it. Let's create ways in which there's more conversation, whether it's a podcast, whether it's we're at the Arc, perfect timing. We did a goddess workshop where, Kali, the prototype of Kali, she's wild and she's naked and she's incredible. We'll talk about Kali in Bad Girl. So every time Kali is demonized, but we did this workshop on how to decolonize Kali, how to take off that sari, how to go, okay, no, she is naked. And that's okay. And, because she represents nature. You're not dressing up nature. Or maybe you are if you're cutting, trimming nature to bits. Yeah. Yeah. And so, this is the lovely art.
Again, so this is, again, I have another particular space for you of good memory.
This is where we had, there's an exhibition going on here as well today. So this is where the wonderful Govind Azad had his work. And I got to rehearse here, surrounded by the paintings. And I think the paintings they were like almost like Bhutto. They had a charge around it. And it was incredible to rehearse in a space like this. It was a brand new space. And then we did the goddess workshop here, and lots of people came. And in goddess workshops, in goddess cultures, we have these tribal movements, which now you have somatic snacks and movement where people are understanding how to not do choreographed dances as a product, but just to move because it feels good in the body. This was happening in indigenous cultures. I think the reason these practices were demonized is because these practices are this is what the natural human body does. It's not a prescription. It's not really. It's just it feels good to move. Like a child will just move because it feels good to move. And so you see these dance styles are essentially that. They're codified history in which people are just moving because the body feels good. And so we have drum dances or different folkloric styles. We just played with that. We did we did a goddess quiz. We discovered our own goddess archetype, and again things like, your goddess archetype is going to be different to my goddess archetype, and they can sometimes also even clash. But that's okay. There's an awareness to these bits that we have repressed within us. So I suppose really it's about decolonizing ourselves in that space. In which ways am I suppressing, and is it safe? You don't have to be. Is it safe for that to flower? There's no pressure. That bit that is trying to protect me, can I bring my attention to that protector part of me? And then once I've brought attention to it, it naturally lets go. And then I just am in that space. Yeah. We also did a film called Elegy, which was inspired by, the Anthony Gormley statue.
Yeah.
And I collaborated with a wonderful filmmaker called Giles Toller, who co-directed it and went out into the ocean when the tide was up and filmed the statue from the front, and I created a character called it was just in red. It was like a Bhutto dance piece, where in Bhutto, in Japanese form dance style, it's as a classical dancer where everything had to be perfect. Bhutto was the opposite of that, was the imperfections. And this became this ode to grief. And the music was by someone who lives in Ashford, actually, called Preeti Pentel.
Sorry.
It's all right. And Preeti wrote these 3 pieces, and one of them was Elegy. And I heard the music, and I just take all these long walks. A lot of my songs from Vishnu's Got My Back has been written because from those walks on the beach. Like, I find walking quite therapeutic, and songs can emerge from that space. But when I heard Elegy and I saw the statue, I was like, this has to be a duet with the statue. So the statue is standing there unconditionally, wave after wave coming. And if you look at it as a metaphor for life, like whatever is coming my way, I'm rock solid, I'm anchored. And so the grief character that we played was like, why is this happening to me? How can you forsake me? Ah! And then going, oh, no one's forsaken me, I've forsaken myself. So when I stand and surrender to that power that is greater than me, everything reaches homeostasis again. And so that angry person, that grief-struck person, that traumatized person lets go of that narrative, and healing is what's around, and the sea is calm. Do you see? Yeah, so that kind of became the film. And it's on YouTube. It's called Elegy.
Look it up.
We're gonna put your links up. So I guess that's as we finish up. I guess that's the thing. I'm gonna put. So you've got lots more content planned coming up that's going to go on all these platforms. We were talking earlier about all the challenges of getting that all onto different types of platform now. But again, we'll put the links up. But Ash,
thank you.
What a fantastic morning I've had with you. Really great to speak to you. I will actually catch up with you again. I'm sure you'll have more news going forward. I don't think this is the end of the story, is it?
This is the end of the story at Percy Road.
So for now, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And you have a super day.
Thank you.